Hi there, Steve Kaufman here again. And I want to stay on this theme of studying grammar, which I referred to in my last video. And of course, in the last video, I talked a bit about our Spanish mini stories, but I wasn't able to show you how I do it on our website at LingQ. So I managed to get my Movavi software to work, so I'm going to show you that, and I'm just going to briefly introduce that to you now. But one of the big debates is how much do we need to study grammar? When people think of learning languages, they think of studying grammar. That seems to be the first thing they think of, and then they say, well, I'm not very good at languages because they couldn't remember the grammar, they couldn't get things right and stuff like that. One thing that I do know is those languages that I speak the best are the ones where I have no sense of the grammar. Why do I speak them the best? Because I have had more exposure to those languages than to any other. So there's no question that the more exposure we have, the better we speak. The less we think of grammar, the better we speak. However, to some extent, the grammar can be a shortcut because we can't invest, 20,000 hours into listening a language. We want to get there more quickly. Can the grammar help us get there more quickly? And I think over the next few videos, I'm going to talk about to what extent we mix in grammar, to what extent we can just rely on listening and reading. And so in that sense, I want to get to these mini stories, which are a form of content that it's not passionate, compelling, interesting stuff, but they're not uninteresting little stories, but they have a lot of repetition. So they help us get going in the language. And as I mentioned earlier, I think that if there are things, grammatical structures that we simply don't notice, even after a lot of exposure to the language, that's why it's occasionally a good idea to read through a grammar book. It's a good idea, in my view, to save phrases and to tag them. And I'll show you resources that can help you make sure you tag them correctly. And probably we need to provide a little more help to people. But fundamentally, it's going to be just, getting your nose into some reading, doing the listening, exposing yourself to the language with a little bit of a reminder through these other ways that you increase your awareness of the language, you increase your awareness of what's happening in the language. But it's not a matter of studying grammar, memorizing rules, memorizing tables. That is only going to increase, in my view, your self-doubt and decrease your ability to speak fluently. So with that as an introduction, I want to show you what I was doing in Spanish on our system at LingQ. And if you enjoy these videos, please subscribe, and I look forward to any feedback. Bye for now. The first story in this mini story series in Spanish is La historia de Miguel, un cocinero que trabaja en un restaurante. Story of Miguel, a cook who works in a restaurant. These stories exist parallel. The same story exists in 20 languages. And it is our hope that people, even absolute beginners, can start right in to a story like this and start becoming familiar with the language. So I'm taking the example of Spanish. Some of you may be new to Spanish. Some of you may be fluent in Spanish, but please bear with me. So, as I look at this, here's the first sentence. Miguel se levanta a las 6 todas las mañanas. What does this mean? I don't know. Okay, Miguel, person. All right, I needn't look that up. Se levanta. What's se? Click on se, and it's... Now, I've turned off the text-to-speech because it comes on too loud. But this is a reflexive pronoun. Yeah, I still don't know what that means. Levanta, lifts. Yeah, I still don't know what that means. Click again, and I've got the phrase, Miguel wakes up. Aha, Miguel wakes up. And I have targeted, at least tagged that as reflexive. Se levanta, raises himself. Miguel se levanta. So I've decided to save that as a phrase. Okay, Miguel gets up. I'm getting there. Don't forget that in these stories, you always have the translation available. So if you're having trouble saving words, one word at a time, one phrase at a time, you can always look up the translation by clicking on this little translation tag. So, next phrase, a las 6. 6, what's 6? You look up 6, it's 6. Las 6, What is las seis? 6 o'clock. Why is that? Las is the plural feminine. So this is very useful. A las seis, first of all, as a phrase, at 6 o'clock, is a time phrase. I've tagged it for time. Las refers to las horas. We don't know that right away, but we have at least the phrase a las seis at 6 o'clock. Okay, Miguel gets up at 6 o'clock. Then we have the next phrase, todas las mañanas. Mañana is morning. Okay, we also know mañana is tomorrow. And we have las mañanas, every morning, the morning. A couple of choices there. But we see that las mañanas, we had las seis, las mañanas, it has to agree. Similarly with todas. Todas las mañanas. Todas las mañanas. Now, I intend to make a little video for each of these simple stories to help people understand, notice what they're seeing here. They're seeing this agreement of the adjective with las mañanas. And we save the phrase, and I save this as an expression of time again, just like a las seis. Because later on, I want to see all these expressions of time. Okay? And so I can go through, we had a reflexive sort of phrase here, Miguel se levanta. Here we have another one. Toma is to take a coffee, and he drinks coffee. Se toma. Now, I also saved this as a reflexive phrase. And I can go on doing the same. Va al trabajo en su coche, and, su trabajo a las 7:30. Here's another time phrase. Siete is 7, but I click again at 7:30, a las 7:30. Why don't I tag this as a time expression? And that way I can review these later on. De la mañana. Okay, mañana, as we know, is morning. Listen to it again. De la mañana, in the morning. There's another time expression. So that's one example. Now, in our mini stories, the first 20 lessons are all in the present tense. But thereafter, we introduce other tenses. We introduce the subjunctive. And so you may very well want to save examples of the subjunctive, examples of past tense, or anything that you're having trouble with. One thing I should point out is that in any of these, let's say we go to prepara, you can look up other dictionaries. All right? If you look up other dictionaries, not only can you look for other dictionaries, but you can also look up the conjugation. Now I have to drag this in to my screen here. Prepara. Okay? Here you have prepara. Tells you where you are. It's the third person. Él, ella, usted prepara. And so you can see the conjugation. If you were in the imperfect or the future or the conditional, you would be able to see that right away. So one of the advantages of working online is that you can immediately find out more information, like if we go to Toma, all right, takes, we look up dictionary, we have two different, there's a whole variety of dictionaries that you can choose from, but I find that this conjugator is very useful. So toma, tomas, toma, tomamos, and you can look up the conjugation. So I believe that with this kind of help, and even though the stories is a little more difficult, but if you go through the story, part A, which is Miguel es cocinero, then we get this section B where me levanto. Here Miguel gets up. And we start to get used to the fact that because it's levanto, levantas, levanta, it changes. We don't need to say Miguel here. Me levanto. I get up. I get up. He doesn't say yo me levanto. He doesn't say I get up. He just says get up. Me levanto. Preparo el desayuno. And so we have the same vocabulary again a second time, but this time the story is told by Miguel. And then finally we start to get questions with again the same vocabulary. Miguel se levanta. And we've already gotten used to that phrase. A las 6, todas las mañanas. There's a statement. A question. Se levanta Miguel temprano. And we see that in Spanish they use the upside down interrogation mark. But because you have the answer here, Miguel se levanta a las 6 todas las mañanas. And then question. Se levanta Miguel temprano. Early. Okay, early. Sí. Miguel se levanta a las 6 todas las mañanas. And so we get a repetition 3 times. So once you've gone through this once, and then you listen to the person reading.
Historia 1. Esta es la historia de Miguel, un cocinero que trabaja en un restaurante.
So you work this, you listen to it several times, even though it's your first lesson, the vocabulary repeats, you say phrases, you look up verbs. I think a person can get going in this language from this level. And we're going to have 60 stories at least in each language. And we're going to help people to say phrases and tag phrases. And I think this is going to be an interesting way to learn. And if you then want to do the same series of stories in Italian or French or Russian or Chinese, you've already been through it in one language and you can easily transition to another language. So I hope that's helpful, and thanks for listening. Bye for now.